Welcome back to Metflex and Chill. This is your host, Rachel Gregory, and today we have Aaron Straker as our guest. So Aaron and I were introduced by our good friend Ashley Van Houten. Ashley has actually been on the podcast too. She was on episode 3, I believe, back when we first launched, and it was an awesome episode. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, definitely check that one out after you listen to this one, of course. So a little background on Aaron. Aaron Straker is a licensed primary sports nutritionist with a pragmatic approach to nutrition that focuses on simple food selection, the importance of nutrient density, and the importance of objectivity in dieting and reporting. So objective eating is actually something that we dive into pretty deep during this episode. It's something that I haven't really thought about much. So Aaron kind of broke it down, and it's definitely a really cool concept. So we'll be talking about that in this episode. And then also Aaron is passionate about providing sound education and information in the fitness and nutrition space and putting nutrition at the forefront of producing optimal health, which is obviously what I encourage as well. So a little bit of what we talk about in this episode, like I mentioned, we talk about objective eating, what it is, why it's important to understand objective eating versus subjective eating. Those are hard words to say. We talk about the importance of comparing satiety when it comes to whole foods versus processed foods. We talk about the importance of tracking and recording data. We also chat about why all nutrition labels are not 100% accurate. And we discuss some signs and symptoms of insulin resistance and talk about Aaron's experience with this. And then we also dive into why meal plans are not great for long-term sustainability. And lastly, we chat about the priority progress matrix, which is a cool concept as well. So there's lots of great info in this episode. I know you're going to enjoy it. You can swipe up if you're listening to this on iTunes to check out the show notes, and anything that we talk about, I'll link in the show notes. I'll also link to Aaron's Instagram and website as well, so you can check him out. And then, as always, if you're enjoying this episode, the best way to help me spread the word about this podcast is to take a screenshot of the episode while you're listening to it, post it on your Instagram story, and tag me at rachelgregory.cns. That helps to spread the word. I will obviously share it on my end, and thank you for listening. And yeah, that would be awesome if you could do that. And that's all I got. Let's get into this episode with Aaron Straker. All right, welcome back to the show. I'm here with Aaron Straker. How are you doing today, Aaron?
Good, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. I'm excited to chat with you. Before we dive in, do you want to give our listeners just a little background on kind of your journey into kind of the nutrition fitness world and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So name's Aaron Straker. I'm an NASN licensed primary sports nutritionist. And how I kind of got into that was through basically more so the fitness side. When I was younger, I played football in high school, and that led me into powerlifting. Originally, we had to in the off season, and just through that was like my introduction into, I guess, like, fitness and lifting. And then through that, went to college and just kind of stopped playing sports for a while and continued being in the gym more regularly, but nothing special. After that, I got into CrossFit in the early days, back in like 2009. And that led me to like kind of the first structure of nutrition in my life, which was paleo. And then through that, really just kind of kept diving deeper and got really swallowed up in the Southern California CrossFit scene and really just wore myself out really, really badly. A couple of pretty serious injuries because my like lifestyle nutrition really wasn't there. I was really deep in paleo, but I was doing like super high level CrossFit, not eating any carbohydrate, under eating, and just wearing myself out. So a couple injuries, ruptured Achilles tendon. I also tore my patella tendon, which required surgeries for those. And those were both within like 3 years of each other. And then eventually I just like kind of hit a head. I was like, I'm I'm young, I'm 25 years old. Why is my body falling apart? And it wasn't. I was just really under recovering and under feeding myself. So that's when I really started paying attention and going down the rabbit hole of nutrition. I had a good friend who's a nutrition coach, and I learned a lot from her. And that's where like my eyes really opened up to what I was actually doing. I just thought, I was like, oh, if you eat healthy, you're good, but like healthy is very subjective and it doesn't have any, quantitative aspect of it. So that's what originally the start was. And the deeper I dove, the more I was like, wow, this is incredible. What I was able to do with myself, turn around my injuries, recover, take control of my body composition, how I looked and how I felt really was just the really big part of it. And then I was like, I want to go more deeper with this. So I went in, got my license, got certifications and stuff. And that's been a couple of years of that now.
Awesome. So are you still doing CrossFit now? Or are you put that aside?
I stopped. So the year after I ruptured my Achilles tendon, I went to regionals. And it was at regionals where I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. It just wasn't fun anymore, as the way I said. I didn't have any more CrossFit related goals. My goals were really in like strength, and I wasn't so far bought in at that point where I knew like it wasn't the appropriate tool for the job. So I stopped and I never started again.
Yeah. It's funny. We have kind of similar stories. I had a back injury a few years ago and I was doing CrossFit for a while, but I wasn't like competitive. It was more just, I liked the atmosphere. I liked the friendly competition. I liked going and not having to think about, what I was doing. I was just kind of following along with the classes. And again, I just loved the competition part of it. But I got injured and that was like 2.5 years ago now, 2 years ago now. And I haven't gone back. But just like exactly what you said, like my goals kind of changed. I was really wanting to get more into like the body composition side of things and really building strength and building muscle and things like that. So I definitely know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
With that. Would you say like with training, what do you kind of do now?
Right now, I have a few set of dumbbells and I'm, yeah, but no,
quarantine life.
Yeah. Kind of like a power building style approach. So, but not, I'm using a little bit of the powerlifting stuff for more like volume. So I'm not really pulling for like 1 RMs or anything right now, but up front, a lot of them is core strength, compound lifts, and then always finishing like my days and then like later parts of my week with more style hypertrophy workouts, full range of motion stuff just to keep all my joints healthy. Once you've been through the ringer with like, tendon surgeries and stuff, you wise up pretty quick when you don't want to go through those anymore. So yeah, that's what I would describe it.
For sure. Cool. So let's dive into a little bit so I went kind of stalking your website and your blog and stuff like that. And kind of, everything that you're putting out there is awesome. There are a few topics that I want to dive a little bit deeper on, just for our listeners to kind of hear and chat about. The first one that I really, really love your approach on is kind of this concept of objective eating. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, how you came across that and maybe explain what that actually is?
Yeah, of course. So objective eating is really where I kind of settled in, or what I like to call just being really objective with your nutrition. And it's interesting because nutrition is one of those spaces where a lot of things, basically like personal opinions, fears, and kind of like fads can cloud the objectivity of what is actually happening. So those things I just talked about, like personal opinions, fears, and fads are subjective, meaning that if you talk to 2 different people, you might get 2 different opinions or, fads on them. But objectivity is like with, let's take whatever rice, it's carbohydrate primarily. There's a very small amount of fat in it and almost unmeasurable amounts of protein. Objectively, whether you talk to someone who likes like keto or they have, fear of carbs or whatever, like that is objective information. And then with working with clients and explaining a lot of these things where you get different, fears that come or kind of labeling of food is what I would really like to call it. objectively, once you can sit and explain to these people and say like, no, okay, when you break it down, whether you want to, be eating healthy or try and gain weight, lose weight, objectively, you can measure and quantify the food you're eating in your dietary intake to take the kind of decision-making process and remove your personal, opinions or fears or the subjectivities from it, and really just rely on the data and objectivity to help you progress towards your goals.
I love that. I love that. And that's kind of, with being in like the keto low carb space for a while, there was, I kind of went down like the keto rabbit hole and actually like really built a business out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really like, I've grown as, just through my experiences, through working with clients, things like that. And exactly what you're saying is really what I've grown into over the past few years. It's just like, we can't be super dogmatic about our views when it comes to food, and we shouldn't like be putting, emotion and religion behind these things, because it's all like objective, and there's no like quote unquote bad or good foods, right? I mean, that statement, it's like I say that statement and then I think about it, and I would say that, there can technically be bad foods when I dive deeper into like vegetable oils and like that really processed crap. Like, yeah, I would probably put that in a bad category, but then like, as we think about it, we're like, okay, we shouldn't be calling these things bad or good. Like, they don't have morality to them. So I love like your kind of that, the objective eating side of things. I love how you explain that for sure.
Yeah, with that, the context is the biggest thing there with the labeling of like good or bad. And it's like, and one, I don't like to speak in absolutes. And the second is like, I'm sure there is some context where what might be a bad food for like 80% of the people is going to be like perfectly fine for someone who like a massive person, a world's strongest man competitor, someone who's eating 10,000 calories per day because they're 400 pounds. And you're going to tell them like, you can't have those blueberries because there's sugar in them and they're bad. And someone's like, they're probably putting down 800 calories of carbs a day because they need that to maintain their body weight for their sport and their livelihood. And that's in that context, what's good for them is, maybe bad for other people. But again, it's all contextual dependent.
Yeah, for sure. And then also kind of talking about the like flexible dieting side of things. I feel like that has also, if it fits your macros and stuff like that, like I'm not against that. I actually, I feel like I say this every single time I record a podcast episode, but, talking about that 80-20 or 85-15, kind of ratio of, 80-20 whole foods, if it had a face at some point or grown from the earth from some point, like that's what the majority of your diet should be. So yeah, blueberries have grown from the earth at some point, versus like the package and stuff like that is more like the other, 10 to 15%. So how do you work that into, is that something that you believe in, like in your kind of not believe in, we don't, I guess we're trying to get away from this subjectivity, but like kind of how do you structure that 85-15 flexible dieting? Is that something that you follow or?
Yes. So I like the term flexible dieting. And then what I really say is like, yes, flexible dieting, but it's not if it fits your macros. Right. And the example I give is like, yes, under, perfect conditions, if you know what you're doing, you can lose weight obviously you can gain weight, but you can like lose weight doing the pure IIFYM, college bro style diet, but like your insides are going to be falling apart. And eventually you're going to be like, it's not worth this, trying to be this because of what's happening. So I like to call it flexible dieting. The first kind of pillar of that is going to be your food quantity, but then like right underneath, I'm sneaking in food quality and making sure that we're on the same page there. I like to use the 85 to 90% whole quality, nutrient dense food sources, and then 10 to 15% of what I call your flexible foods. And that's going to be different for everyone. So protein is kind of, across the board, there's not much like flexible protein, but when it comes to carbohydrate or fat, so if you're someone who likes typically with people in their sweets, they're going to go more like there's like the candy, like gummy bear type side or like the chocolate type side. And then fortunately, one's like essentially entirely a carbohydrate. Other one's usually a little bit higher in fat with the chocolate. But what I'm saying is like, if or what I want to convey to people is like, if you can follow, if you need that 10 to 15% to actually adhere and stay consistent week over week and not have the, oh my God, I've been eating my vegetables all week, I haven't had any of my vices. And then you hit Sunday and you just fall apart and, fall off and completely derail yourself. That's not what we want. Like we don't want to, create a structure that's so rigid that you can't live your life and be consistent with it. So with that 10 to 15%, if you want to have dark chocolate, as a small snack after dinner, and it fits in that 15% of your calorie range and you're still fitting it in, like there's no reason you can't do that and still make progress, whether you're trying to just sit at maintenance, improve body composition from there, whether you're trying to diet, whether you're, in a surplus. Obviously, when you're in a surplus, you have much more food to eat. So that 10 to 15% gets a lot larger, but the same scale holds true, whether you're, at maintenance, dieting in a surplus. And it just really helps with adherence in the long term, which is what matters most.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Adherence is like, especially if fat loss in particular is the goal, I believe like adherence is everything. Like what can you adhere to? While at the same time also realizing that like, you can, lose body fat and still be healthy, but you can also lose body fat and not be healthy at all.
100%.
And so it's like, you hear of like, well, this person followed the Twinkie diet and they lost weight. Well, yeah, but like you said, their insides are probably all messed up. And then also realizing too, like a lot of people don't realize, but if your diet is made up of a lot of packaged foods, no matter what type of package process it is, if it's like, keto processed food versus, sugar, regular cereal processed food, all of those kind of nutrition labels and all those things are not 100% accurate. Like and especially if you are trying to follow macros like to a T and you have a specific goal in mind, like that the accuracy of that is just like you're gonna keep spinning your wheels, because those packaged foods are not like the nutrition labels aren't accurate, and there's like so much variance between that people don't even realize. They think that this this bar says it has this amount of carbs, protein, and fat, but in reality there can be like a 20% up to 20% variance.
I don't remember the exact figure, but I think the FDA allows it's either 10 or 20% margin of error on the labels. So that's what I always say is like the more barcode scanning you're doing, the harder of a time you're going to have.
Yeah.
Just because you don't have control over those variations. But if you take like an apple, an apple is pretty much an apple. So you weigh it out, you know what you're getting. There's no discrepancy on the food label there. It's a little bit simpler.
Sure. Yeah. And then it also just makes, like, if you think about it, like the more processed food you're eating, like probably, the less full and satisfied you're going to feel, because when you're not getting good nutrients too, it's just, even a protein bar that's 300 calories versus 300 calories of chicken breast, it's like completely
wildly different. Yeah. So I just was talking to someone about this the other day. There's this thought that like calories equate satiety and in volume, and that's not true at all. I mean, granted, there is some truth to it. Obviously, something that's 200 or like 2,000 calories is a larger amount, but you can take 1,500 calories of like, wheat thins, protein shakes, and I don't know, something other processed, and I can give you like 1,500 calories of like literally lean meats, vegetables, and like, a starchy carb like a rice or a potato. Potato's a great example. And the satiety and volume that you're going to get out of the whole food sources is, probably double what you're going to get from the other one. So you can stretch, the same equated calories much further in terms of volume, satiety, and overall basically success you're going to get just from eating more, whole food sources.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. So another kind of topic I wanted to discuss that I came across on your website was the priority progress matrix. Did I say that right? Priority progress matrix. I was like, I came across that and I watched the video. I was just super intrigued by it. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah.
So basically it's, I get questions from clients about rates of progression and, why they read somewhere that it should be, this 1 pound a week or different things. And I got into thinking it's really there's two matrices, right? On the left, there is your progress. And then on the y-axis is your progress. The x-axis is going to be the priority. And the higher that you can prioritize your training and nutrition, the faster that you can expect to progress. And the examples I use in that are like let's say a single individual in their like early to mid 20s who's got like a low stress job and they can dedicate lots of time to their training and nutrition. Maybe they go with like a local meal prep company. If they don't want to really dive into their nutrition themselves, they have all those meals delivered. It's a big expense, but they have no dependents or whatever, and a good paying job. They can do that. They can expect to make lots of progress. They're training 5 to 6 days in the gym. They have no stress from like children, family, maybe some family stress, no family stress, no significant other, right? They can make a lot of progress because it's a very high priority in their life. The middle kind of example I give is maybe that same person. They're now maybe 10 years older. They travel for work more. Some training trips, some training and then nutrition might get blown up by like, hey, we need to have this work dinner with a big, sales, someone that they're trying to account to close, overseas travel type of things. So they can still progress. It's just not as high of a priority in your life, and you will progress slower. And the third example that I think is really big, or a really good one, is like the single mother. She's got, 2 kids at home. They're young. That's a big commitment. It's a much higher priority than training and nutrition. And yes, she can still make progress, but she might only be able to realistically get to the gym twice a week. Things might get blown up when a kid's sick. You need to go get your kitty sick from school or something like that. And it's just, you're just not able to prioritize it as high as, say, someone, who's 20 years younger, 10 years younger, doesn't have any children. And it's really just a way to be realistic with what you can expect out of your progress. Sometimes our expectations are very, very high and don't necessarily match our willingness or commitment of where we can really prioritize nutrition in our life and our training in order to, really reap those expectations that we have.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So do you work with like a bunch of different types of clients, or how do you kind of implement this into your like practice? Like when you work with clients, you kind of, assess where they're at first, and then
assess where they're at, assess where, the training and nutrition is really going to fall on their plate. And that again, will kind of influence the types of approaches we'll take, the lengths of approaches, and just really being realistic with them. So someone who's only lifting, 2 or 3 times a week, I'm going to be realistic with them and say, you're probably not going to be putting on, half a pound of muscle every single week when you're only training, 2 to 3 times a week. You're probably not going to be blowing up your strength numbers on a, a lower training schedule like that. And then for the types of people I work with, it's typically males, mid 20s to like late 40s, early 50s, that are specifically looking to improve body composition, still make tons of progress in the gym. Everyone's looking to lose some body fat and get a little bit leaner, feel more comfortable in their own skin. And then really just the type of really committed person, typically who's already been in the gym for a while. As I don't do any kind of training programming myself, I always refer out for that because I like to focus purely on the nutrition and lifestyle myself.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And as we're talking about progress, how do you, because I know like different people track progress in different ways. And I kind of, with my clients, I always kind of nail down the point. Is I work with a lot of women. And so the scale is the big kind of elephant in the room. And even months on months talking about the scale not being, the most important piece, it's always kind of there in the back of your head. And so I use a scale in a specific way. I'm curious, like what type of progress, like measurements and things like that you use in terms of the physical aspect of it. But then also, as a coach yourself, are there other lifestyle aspects in terms of like biofeedback and measurements like sleep and stress and all of that you kind of track with your clients?
Yeah. So, really good question. I like this because I'm super, super big on data. And again, with the objectivity, I think it helps, one, it removes some of the opinion and fear from it. And it helps really drive our the direction and decisions we make. So I'll start with the, subjective side. with the weekly check-in with all my clients each week, I have them report subjective mood, sleep quality, their energy levels, and stress. So I want to see those mostly specifically when we are in any sort of dieting phase, and digestion as well, to make sure that cortisol kind of isn't chronically kind of piling up on them and they're starting to slip under being able to recover amply. So those are subjective aspects I track. And then objectively, so it's interesting. The weight thing is big for a lot of people. And I kind of took a different approach as I have everyone who's up to it. And when I do get some resistance or fears from it, I definitely remove it. But I have people weigh themselves every single day. I have them weigh it every single day and report it every day. And then with the check-in, we do a 7-day moving average. And what that actually, I really like about that is people kind of can get a little bit discouraged and think they're not progressing fast enough. And I don't even have to, explain it to them. We have it in a chart, and I'm saying like, but you're making progress. Like your averages are moving in the direction you want them to move. Sometimes those expectations might just be outside of what, the scope of for what their adherence level is, or, with the type of commitment level they do have. And the reason I like that is because we know that your weight fluctuates for a variety of different reasons. And why I like the 7-day versus the weekly weigh-in is like, let's say last week you weigh in, you're 157 pounds. And this week, in your weigh-ins on like Wednesday morning, and on Tuesday, night this week, you went out, you had a little bit more carbohydrate than you normally do. You had a little bit of alcohol, and you come in and you're like, 158.2. And that can just kind of start this, negative feedback cycle of negative thoughts about like this whole week was for nothing. I didn't make any progress. But if we had those 7-day averages, your 7-day average was down from the previous week, but you just had a little bit more glycogen in your body, right? In your muscles, in your liver, you had a little bit more water that holds along with the glycogen. There's a little bit of inflammation, maybe from a harder training session on Tuesday, and the alcohol on top of it. So when you look at those, you're like, yeah, of course your weight's up a little bit because of these. But if we only took that, one weigh-in, it's harder to capture, that objective information to help us make those decisions and kind of step back off the ledge of our fears, kind of running wild about one bad weigh-in.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love that because immediately when you said that, that's exactly what I do. We for all of my clients, it's always the weekly average, and always, I recommend, I push them to weigh themselves daily so that we can get an accurate weekly average. But at least 3 times a week, like at the minimum. Yeah. Especially for women, like the scale will fluctuate daily. Like some people, even for myself, sometimes it's crazy what happens, but exactly what you said, like if you're only doing that one day, you're never going to see the progress that you've been making. And it's crazy. Like when I start explaining, because I work with a lot of clients who are women. And when I explain like the weekly average, they're like, wow, I never even thought about this. I didn't think about this before. Like I would always think about it the other way, where I didn't look at it on an average basis. So I wasn't really seeing like what was really happening with progress. Cause that's a huge thing too. Like if you are going to use the scale, like use it in a way that is productive towards, you can actually see what's going on, not just like the daily fluctuations that come from, like you said, your water retention, sodium, how much food or fiber you ate or you have. There's so many different like aspects to that. So I think that's I think it's super important to just be educated on, how to use the scale appropriately. But then also so like for my clients, we do body tape measurements every week. It's part of their weekly check-in as well. Do you do that with your clients at all? I don't require them to do that. Some like to do that, especially because there's like certain areas they're specifically interested in, but I do have weekly photos too. And that's mostly for me to really observe their progression. And again, with that, it's the trying to remove the variables. So it's like when I tell everyone with the progress photos, like, when you can, obviously some people who like travel for work, it's not, but I want it fasted first thing in the morning, like
after you've went to the bathroom and you brushed your teeth. Because comparing, like, we want to be comparing apples to apples. Like if you compare a check-in photo of yourself from like Sunday morning to like, Friday evening after you've had 2,000 or 3,000 calories, like of course your stomach's going to look different because you put pounds of food in it that's still inside you. So I think like a little bit things like explaining that to people, or just saying like, these are the reasons we want to normalize our data so that we can, be confident with the statistical significance of it, because we've kind of scrubbed the data for variances and external outliers.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I mean, the more data you have, I feel like the more you can work with. So I completely agree. The reason I do weekly body tape measurements is just like whenever I make nutritional adjustments, I never make them off of like the scale number, because that can even the weekly average itself cannot be super accurate, because even like I like to look at the trend of the weekly of the scale, and that can even be over months. So body tape measurements for me personally, from what I've seen with my clients, it's like that really tells us a lot, especially with women that I work with. Like I've had women, lose inches with body tape measurements, haven't lost that much on the scale. And even like some, like we take monthly progress pictures, and sometimes even month 1 to month 2, or there's not a huge difference, but you look at like the inches they've lost and they're like, yeah, like I lost inches and, my clothes are fitting better, but the scale's kind of still the same. And my pictures, I don't really see a difference, but I like literally line up their body tape measurements from month 1 to whatever, week 6, start to week 6. And like, they literally see the difference and they're like, oh, okay. That makes sense. Yeah. I'm making progress.
You have to really put all the pieces in front of them. And one I'll explain to my clients, because they're like, I don't really see a difference in the pictures. And I'm like, if you look at yourself every single day, and the changes that happen like day to day are so minuscule, you will never be able to notice them day to day. But then I'm able to look at them objectively, one, because I'm not, I don't have the emotional investment in it or that. So it's like, I can see the changes where them looking at their pictures or looking at themselves and like, I feel like I haven't lost any weight, or I feel like I don't look different. And I'm like, that's a subjectivity. So like your feelings and stuff will lie to you because you think, okay, I've been doing this, I should be 3 times as far along as I am. But like, that's not rooted in any reality or, or average progression rates. That's just something like your mind will kind of go crazy on you a little bit. So that's where it's like, it's nice having the more metrics you have, the more just significance you can have, or the more results you can pull out of it, which really, really helps the clients when their mind kind of starts to play tricks on them. Yeah,
for sure. I agree completely. I do want to ask you, so how long have you been coaching one-on-one clients for?
So for about 2 years, I did it part-time when I still had my software gig before, when I was still in the transitioning and learning, and I've been full-time now for about 1.5 years.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yep.
And did you ever have like a coach, or do you have a coach yourself, or did you ever have like a nutritioner?
I did. Yeah. So I worked with, Jason Theobald, he's real big in the bodybuilding world. He's IFBB pro. But specifically, I worked with him on improving my insulin sensitivity. And that was, let's say, probably coming up on 2 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Oh, man, it's awesome. So it was one of the kind of rabbit holes I went down. And I just heard him. I forget where I found out about him, on a podcast or something somewhere. And he was talking about using glucometers, like, like a diabetes patient would have for checking your blood sugar, for seeing how well your body is handling carbohydrate, especially leading into going from coming off the off season of a gaining phase, going into a diet. So you really don't want to be heading into a diet with your blood sugar and your morning fasted blood glucose high, because it's showing that your body is, starting to show signs of insulin resistance. So I was going through that, and I was a little bit, at that point, I was really pushing a lot of strength, and I was a lot bigger than I am now. I was almost 230 pounds. And I was like, okay, yeah, like mine's not great. And then I have a lot of history of type 2 diabetes on the dad side of the family. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna like, get this in order. So just reached out to him and worked with that. And it was really, really cool to see how we did things. And the first thing we did was like put me in keto, basically, pull over all my carbohydrates into fats and just, work through that and go through a lot of the different processes of like checking it, getting different blood work done, which was like my first real big foray into like basically getting all my own blood work done, reading it and learning a lot about that. So it was wildly a really, really cool learning process. I think I got really lucky with just by luck of like having my first, nutrition coach being like such a solid resource. And I've still to this day, I've learned so much from him. I just did he teaches a lot of like hormone classes and stuff too. I just did one with him like 2 or 3 weeks ago. That was really, really good. Just such a wealth of like forward kind of thinking and knowledge with like the chops and the physique to back it up too, which is cool.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So what was kind of your experience when you did transition like over to keto, like initially?
I honestly, it was really, really rough for me. And at first we just kind of transitioned to keto because I was eating a lot. I was eating like 3,500 calories. Okay. And so we just moved a lot of it over to fat. And it was just like, but it wasn't like true keto. I should say that it was still a high protein. But then we basically just like moved like 3/4 of my carbohydrate calories to fat. So still, it was probably like a 35-ish% protein to like a 50-ish fat. And then, like the extra like 25 carbohydrate. And then we just started pulling down the carbohydrate from there. And I don't think I didn't know enough back then to be like, okay, I should probably pull back the intensity of my training and move into like a more hypertrophy type specific training. But there were times.
Were you doing CrossFit at the time?
No, I was way removed from CrossFit at this point. Okay. Yeah. I think I was following a powerlifting program then. Okay. But it was just hard for like that large shift, and then going into like, okay, I got to squat 90% today, and I haven't had like any carbs, and like not even from like a physiological standpoint, but just from like a mental, like I just wasn't. It was very difficult for me. And then eventually it got to the point where like I was just like I had to switch my programming because it was like I was when I was getting my ass kicked too. I was like the will wasn't there, and when you have to like really show up and lift heavy, and the will isn't there, you're not setting yourself up for success.
Yeah. I mean, I went through many rabbit holes and things like that in keto and low carb and fasting and all that. And that's why I kind of started this show, Metflex and Chill, because I truly, just from what I've learned over the years and working with clients and myself, it's like metabolic flexibility and being able to use, carbs and glucose and sugar when it's warranted. So, if you're working out heavy or, just enjoy, that flexible dieting side of things, if you're dialed in, depending on what you're doing. But then also being able to use, fat and ketones for fuel when that's warranted. And mostly, that kind of managing the inflammation, managing the insulin resistance, which we know is like so prevalent in modern day. And people don't even know that they're insulin resistant. Like they're just walking around, you kind of, what, I guess maybe you said this, but what made you like realize that you were developing some insulin resistance? Or
to make it like a really long story short, I just run high. My body runs high. It got to the point where we went down. I went to see a endocrinologist. We ran a bunch of tests like C-reactive proteins, homocysteine, everything, like fasting insulin. And the endocrinologist told me, okay, like you either run high, so just keep monitoring it. If you notice it kind of eventually getting worse, every 6 months or year over year, it may become a problem, or I may develop type 1 diabetes later in life, which I do have an aunt that happened to, where her pancreas just kind of shit out in her late 30s. So for me, it just hasn't really changed no matter what we did, through the whole thing. I learned so much, but my, HbA1c never went down, a decimal point. My fasting blood glucose stays the same. I lost 27 pounds. I got like shredded and it still didn't go down. Wow. So it's just one of those things for me.
Did you check fasting or did you check insulin? Fasting insulin?
So when we got move at all? It was, my fasting insulin was very, very low. So that's what was very interesting. So I had fasting, my fasting blood sugars are typically around 100. So they're not like super high, but they're not good for someone who's like lean and, really active. But then when we got my fasting insulin done, it barely registered. I think it was like a 3. And I think normal's like an 8 to 8 to 20 or something like that. Yeah. So mine like barely picked up the both times we had it. So it's just one of the things it's just strange. Which is
yeah. But I would say that that's probably a good sign though, because you don't want, I feel like also
if the insulin was high, that would be like, yeah.
Yeah. Cause a lot of people it's so easy to measure blood sugar at home. You can get a blood sugar monitor, or nowadays, were you wearing a continuous glucose monitor, or was it just the finger prick?
The finger prick every single morning. And then once a week I would check all my postprandial levels from meals. And postprandial always came back down to what it was in the morning. So I never had any kind of lingering postprandial numbers, but it was really strange that the mornings were just higher than you would expect for someone like that.
There's some kind of theories and some other things on that, like the dawn phenomenon. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
Yeah. So that could have been something, but I'm interested. I think you should get a continuous, even just now, just for fun. Cause, have you ever heard of Nutrisenso, or I think that's the company?
I don't think so.
So they actually help your normal average person get continuous glucose monitors. They're a little bit pricey, but I wore one, I guess it was back in December, I wore a continuous glucose monitor, and it's just super interesting to see what happens throughout the day, and how certain foods affect it, and what it's like in the morning, and how stress and lack of sleep and all of those factors play into what happens with your blood glucose. And a lot of people think, oh, it's just based off of food, but it's really not. Stress and cortisol.
Yep.
And it's so you should think about that. Just
it would be fun, especially now that I'm back in the States for a little bit and have access to things like that.
Yeah.
But it was really, really interesting, because we went down, got, saliva samples for cortisol and DHEA and everything. And everything was pretty much in line, but it's just, it runs high. I don't know. Yeah. Figure it out one day.
Yeah.
I got time.
So what do you do? What would you say now is just kind of what you're focusing on in terms of your nutrition and your training and stuff? Do you have any specific goals for yourself, or?
Yeah, always. So the one thing that I really, really like about nutrition, and this is more personally, is for me, I look at food and nutrition differently. I think of myself as one big science experiment. What are things that I can, because for me, it removes the pressure of oh, I can't have that food, or I'm on a diet, whatever, isn't the same, because I have my interests go deeper than just looking good or reaching that body. It's what can I learn? And then what can I implement with clients? What can I be able to relatably speak to, because I've done that myself personally. So I'm always experimenting on different things, especially with my nutrition. So right now I'm been spending time doing a little bit more of a weekly cyclical approach, where I will specifically go higher fats in the earlier parts of the week, and then kind of lower carbohydrate, and then go with larger refeeds over the weekend. And the reason for that is, what I find is when you kind of just have the same macros every single day, you kind of get into that, things are just Groundhog Day. You have the same foods and the same quantities. But with that, when you have when you change it up a little bit, I'll have some of my, on my Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I have that, post lunch snack that's my walnuts there. But then, on Fridays and Saturdays, I don't do that, because I'm specifically pushing a lot of carbohydrate. I have my much higher. It's right now, it's a higher volume workout because I can't lift heavier. But I'll go really, really high volume on Saturday workout when I'm also doing a very large refeed with my carbohydrate. So that's what I've been currently experimenting with, kind of a weekly cyclical approach, where I will go lower carbohydrate in the beginning of the week, and then really refill, top off glycogen stores throughout the weekend, and really start over. So that's been fun, learning what I can from there. And then for training, It's been interesting right now. I've been, what's the word I'm looking for? I've really surprised myself at how effective training can be with just a few sets of dumbbells. So I have like 15s through 35. So 15, 20, 25, 30, and 35. Well, it's 130 and 135. And I've been able to have great workouts, but you have to get really honest with yourself. You have to move slow, under control, full range of motion. And the thing that's hard is you can't do like, oh, I did my 7 reps of squats or whatever. It's like, no, you might have to do 18 to 22 or whatever. And that's like arguably more mental than it is physical. Because you can squeeze out those extra reps, but like your legs are on fire and like your brain's telling you to put the weights down, but you just, if you want to make the best of it, and we all have the time right now. So it's been very interesting just how effective you can be with real minimal amounts of equipment.
Yeah, for sure. And exactly what you said, like you have to, like if you were going to the gym and had a heavy barbell, like that's completely different than, 35-pound dumbbells. But if you get to those effective reps, right?
Yeah,
like the effective reps are those reps where you have like, maybe 2 or 3 left in the tank. If you can get there, you're still going to get the same stimulus, right? It obviously it's going to be a little bit different on your nervous system and all that.
You're not going to get like the central fatigue really.
Yeah. But you can still build muscle. And I think that's something that people just don't really understand, or they're not, getting to those effective reps, or like having, 2 to 3, like 1 rep left in the tank. Like you need to get there, but it could be, like you said, 8 reps for one person and 30 reps for another person. And it's just kind of like understanding and realizing that you have to work towards that but you can see progress. Like that's exactly what I've been doing. Like I've been building, up those, obviously doing a lot more reps. I do have some adjustable dumbbells that I purchased right when all this started happening, right? Smart. When I heard I heard the gyms were going to close down. I was like, oh my God, I need to go on Amazon and get like the Bowflex. They're like, they go up to 50 pounds.
That's
adjustable
legit.
Ones.
Yeah.
And I can do so much with those and just some resistance bands. And it's just like understanding. I actually recorded a whole podcast episode on this, like how to get to your effective reps and like all the different, slow down, tempo, do single leg work, tempo. Yep. Yeah. So I think it's just like being educated on it, being educated on anything is like the foundation of everything.
It really is, especially with like training and nutrition.
Yeah. That kind of brings me to another question I have for you. So do you ever, and this is just kind of something I thought about, but do you ever have clients, and we talked about this too, like with macros and stuff like that, do you ever have clients who come to you and like, can you just give me a meal plan like tell me what to do? How do you deal with those clients? So
fortunately, it's something that I put out in front of everything. I put it on like my FAQs and like, so I'm like, first thing, like, we don't do meal plans. And I say like the reason why is because meal plans work. There's no doubt about it, meal plans work. But what happens when you need to go out to dinner with your girlfriend, wife, boyfriend, whatever, you go on that business trip, you are traveling for something and you don't have that meal plan, you are going to revert back to your default habits, which provided you the results you have right now. And you are going to need to be able to make informed decisions and understand, basic food composition structure, what's high in protein, what's high in fat, what to look out for, to be able to steer, navigate your lifestyle when you're not going to be able to eat on that meal plan. Because meal plans, like, you're not going to realistically eat on a meal plan forever. And then even if you are someone who's like able to eat the same foods day in and day out, like I am, but I think largely because my relationship with food is largely of like what I can get out of it in terms of knowledge, body composition, etc. But once you know all this, you can put together that meal plan, or but whenever you do, and it's easy to swap things in and out. But it's really, I tell them like, I'd love to have you as a client forever, but that's not realistic. And if you want to make this lifestyle like the long term, you are going to need to learn how to compose meals and, pivot when you have that lunch, that you brought to work and you have your entire meals all planned out for the day and already packaged. And then you're eyeing for some, new promotion at work, and your boss or whatever is like, hey, let's go get lunch. You're going to say like, no, I already brought my lunch. No, you're going to go get lunch. And then you need to be able to pivot the rest of your day to hit your numbers. But if everything is so rigid that you never learn how to do that, that'll derail someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. That's kind of why I asked the question, because it's like we were talking about education. It's like you have to become educated on this. And I think that there's such a misconception out there with people. And when it comes to like tracking macros, I feel like there's like a negative kind of connotation around macro tracking. And it's like, oh, you're tracking macros all the time. Like you must have an eating disorder or something like that, where it's like, no, actually, like that is your education tool. Like this is what's teaching you what foods are made out of. And if you don't know that and you're just given a meal plan, exactly what you said, like you're never going to be able to sustain the results. Even if you get the results from that meal plan, exactly what you said.
What happens when you get off of it?
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, for my clients too, I'm like, maybe I'll give you like, for example, if you're new to like the ketogenic diet and you want to try keto, and it's your first time, like, yeah, I'll give you some example meal plans and sample meal plans to get things going, but you have to figure out, what works for you in your lifestyle and your, because then it comes down to also like, well, how do I cook for my family if I have to follow this meal plan, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I 100% agree with all of that.
Yep.
I do want to ask you, so obviously this show is called Met Flex and Chill. So metabolic flexibility is the main concept here. So have you had any experience with like metabolic flexibility in terms of like what you've heard about? It's kind of this term that I feel like is not super well known. It's not like, some people don't even necessarily know what metabolic flexibility is. So do you have any experience with just the term, I guess?
The term, yeah.
I'm just curious.
I've definitely heard about it. And I know it's a lot of like, how efficient is your body in switching fuel sources, essentially. And one thing that I know that I personally have experience with, and that, when I work with clients too, is basically when you go from, basically maintenance or a surplus into a deficit, largely you're going to be removing, I mean, for most people, it doesn't have to be this way, but for, the majority is going to be, you're decreasing carbohydrate to some varying degree. And in that, if you can get if you decrease your carbohydrate, you can keep your cortisol under control. Your body's going to prioritize, oxidizing free fatty acids from your adipose tissue, which is, burning fat as a fuel source. And then really how effective or how quickly that can happen. And that's really dependent on an individual. And then what I notice is the people who are a little bit maybe more overweight to start or have more body fat to start, typically is also going to mean they have more incidence of insulin resistance. And that is going to kind of, I don't want to say prevent, but it's a little bit more of a barrier to entry to get the fat burning process effectively and like, moving to a level that you can objectively measure than someone who's already a little bit leaner and doesn't have that same insulin resistance. So in that regard, it's really, once you remove those, how effectively can you start turning over, or how long is that period of you feeling really sluggish where your body's like kind of it hasn't kickstarted it yet. But yeah, it's something that I definitely noticed with one, myself, and two different clients. Yeah,
for sure. I love it. So are there like, in terms of just like your journey and obviously it sounds like you're always trying to learn and continue to educate yourself, which I think with any coach, if you're not, learning yourself on a daily basis, then you're probably not going to be a successful coach. So. Are there any like resources or I know you mentioned, now I'm forgetting his name. Your previous coach.
Yeah. Jason Theobald.
So is there anybody else that you've worked with, or any like anybody you look up to, or resources like books
definitely.
Or things like that?
So Jason's a really, really good resource. I have a good friend, Jen Ryan, who's really, who helped me out in the very beginning when I was really kind of falling apart. So she's a really, really badass nutrition coach. She's also a multi-time CrossFit Games athlete. So she's a super good resource there. I'm like a little bit hesitant to say this because you kind of fall on two sides, but I'm a big Lyle McDonald fan, and he
Okay.
really he puts out like, I mean, you have to admit he was so ahead of almost everyone in the type of information he was releasing. Like his first flexible dieting book, I think it was in like 2004 or 2005 or something like that. And that didn't really catch on for like 7-8 years later where other people were talking about it. But he's really crass.
I'm a fan of his too.
And you kind of have to. So I really like Lyle from good information. I also
have
really
you read
like
the woman's book that
I bought it for my girlfriend.
The woman's book. That's what it's called.
There's the woman's book, volume 1.
Yeah, there's like 8 different volumes.
Yeah. So I haven't been through that one all. I did buy it for my girlfriend. So she has it somewhere. I don't know where we have it packed now.
It's awesome. There's so much.
Yeah, it's just such a deep dive because so much of things treat both male and female physiologies like they're the same. And I mean, yeah, there's a lot of the same parts, but the female physiology is just, there's so many more moving parts. It's much more complicated. It's much more I don't want to use the word fragile because I feel like that's mean, but it's just more important, really. It has a lot more
different variables,
and from an evolutionary standpoint, it has to do a lot more, so that it's easier to affect it in that regard. But that's really good resource. The Cortisol Connection is a really good book. So that one is really, really cool. If you are someone you think you're doing everything right, but you're not seeing the results, there could be, there's another underlying level of, nutrition and hormones in terms of like cortisol and, how to keep that modulated and how that can be kind of stunting your progress.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a big thing too is like, I feel like there's people who are like, hormones don't matter for fat loss. And then there's people who are like, yeah, they do matter. And I'm kind of in the camp where like, calories matter and hormones matter. They both matter. And they both will either bring you, like you said, progress will either be made at, a good rate or maybe a slower rate, which could have to do with those hormones and things like that. So, I mean, I personally believe they all play into each other. But obviously calories matter too. Like you can't just be eating
I think
whatever you want and expect fat loss.
I think it's the same with like the food quantity and food quality. It's like, yes, food quantity matters more, but then like right underneath of it is food quality. And I think the same thing is like with the calories again in hormones. It's like, yes, you can have perfect hormones, but if you eat too much, you can't lose fat because you're literally, you can't. So like, again, calories matter, but then hormones is right underneath it because it's like, you could be in a deficit, but if your cortisol is out of control and you don't sleep and you're a stress bucket, the deficit you would need to go to in order to lose fat isn't realistic. No one can eat 500 calories per day. Exactly. And at that point, even if you do make progress, it's incredibly slow. And the kind of consequences of that outweigh the small amount of progress you're making by tenfold. So,
yeah, exactly. You have to be in a good place hormonally to be able to get into an effective deficit because you'll just spin your wheels and you just make your life harder.
One thing
have you read the
I was gonna say,
you go.
One thing I always say is like when you're doing everything right, it's like when your lifestyle patterns are in order, your sleep is in order, your stress is in order, and you actually are not chronically dieting, and when you do diet, it's really not difficult. Like things kind of fall into place and you shouldn't be super stressed out, but it's like you need to take care of all these big things first. So when you have the big rocks in order and you pull that last little lever, it should work pretty well. And if it doesn't, it's usually something else and largely is off that's, downstream that you need to fix first. Yeah,
for sure. I agree. So I want to end with a few questions because I think we're getting almost close to an hour.
Yeah.
So I like to end with a few questions. So is there anything that you've changed your mind about in the last year, and why have you changed your mind about anything? It's kind of a hard question.
Yeah. Anything. So Okay, really good example. I used to be one of the people of like, if I can't get to the gym and do my like normal, training routine with, these are the exercises I'm doing. If I can't put in that like big hard workout, like I'm not working out. I'm not doing like, push-ups and sit-ups and stuff like that. And then quarantine happened, and it's really just, you can make any workout incredibly difficult, incredibly, high muscle tension just by changing your levers, slowing down, full range of motion. So that's been a big one for me. Which I think has been really, really cool. Cause I think it's like, when you're traveling or on a road trip or something like that, like you can put in a really effective hotel workout, and something is always better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I've had the same kind of experience. I think most anybody who goes to the gym and can't go to the gym in the last 2 months have probably had that experience.
Anyone who's been like the committed person to the gym, where it's not like, oh, well, the gym's closed, I guess I'm not gonna not work out now. Like for people who are like, that's not an option, they've probably had a very similar realization.
Yeah, and it's all about perspective too, and just kind of like having to dig deep and kind of find that. But then it also kind of shows like why, the gym is so important. So I always used to be jealous of people who have like garage gyms, because I'm like, oh, I can just have like, if I had like a squat rack and all this stuff, I'd be set to go. And now like after going through this, I'm like, if I ever get a house, like, yeah, maybe I'll have that, but like, I'm probably still going to go to the gym just because the atmosphere of just being, or even if you just have your headphones in and you're doing your own thing. And that's what actually like pulled me away from like going to the gym for a long time, like going to a Globo gym. And that's why I loved CrossFit, because I could go and like interact with people and like the competition side of it. I was like, I'm never going to be able to go back to a regular gym again, because I'm just going to get so bored. But I did do that. And when I followed like, a program that was actually legit and I was seeing results, then I was like completely changed my mind about things. But even just going to the gym and being around other people who have their headphones in and you're not really talking to them, it's still just being in that atmosphere. It's just like completely different than, being in your house and working out.
Vibes are a big thing about a gym. And even myself, like I've been out of, I haven't done any CrossFit in over 6 years now, really, like, and I still prefer the CrossFit gym, or what I like to call independently owned strength and conditioning facilities. So, like when I was in San Diego, I trained at California Elite Training Center in Kearney Mesa. It's like a big powerlifting gym, but they also have like a huge CrossFit side, Olympic lifting platforms, and like, all the bodybuilding machines and stuff too. And it's an independently owned strength and conditioning facility, and the vibe and atmosphere in there is great. And there's a few places that we've like kind of come across over our travels that have that same, it's just a different atmosphere than your kind of your big box gym, like your run of the mill Golds or something like that. And I think that like those places are the real true gems in my personal opinion.
Yeah. And that's actually kind of what happened to me. Like when I stopped doing CrossFit, when I got injured, I kept going to that gym because they would have like open gym periods. So I started following a different program, but they didn't really have any like machines and stuff, but I was just doing like squat program and stuff like that. And I would just go there because I still liked the atmosphere, even though I wasn't taking the classes. And then I eventually switched to Boulevard Fitness, which is like an old school bodybuilding gym. And it still has a cool vibe, but it's not like a, I don't know. I like the vibe there. So, but yeah, the vibe it's big. That is so important. Yeah. So yeah. I feel the same way about that. I do want to ask too, like, so do you have kind of moving towards like a little bit more of like the mindset side of things and like kind of your daily routine? Do you have anything that you do on a daily basis in terms of like the mindset side of things? Maybe like, personal development or meditation or any type of like morning routine that you do? Yeah.
So this is an interesting one. I had struggled to get into meditation for a very long time, and I'm very picky about like really strange things that people aren't picky about. I never found a meditation that I liked. It was either like, I don't like the person's voice. I don't want to be pitched. I mean, I get it, right? People make money off of their podcasts and stuff like that sometimes. if I'm meditating and you're pitching me on like buying something, like I'm not going to be able to do it. So that was one. And then until I finally found this app called, I'm gonna have to look it up. I don't remember the name of it, which seems so silly to me. But
I'm curious.
It starts with an M. That's all I can think of right now. It is. It doesn't start with an M. I lied. It's called Serenity.
Serenity. Okay.
And it's perfect. There's like your normal ones, and then what I really like is there's like 2 to 3 minute ones where it's just like really quick. You sit down, and that's been really, really. And I've been consistent for probably like a month now, every single day on it. Sometimes I do it multiple times a day. So that one's been really, really good. So I would definitely recommend checking that one out. Serenity, okay. Yeah. And then I've been taking cold showers, ice cold showers every single day. And that has been my daily mental challenge.
Fun.
It's not fun.
What got you to do that? To do that?
On January 5th, our hot water heater took a shit.
Oh.
So I had to for like 5 days. We were also living in Colombia at the time. And things just like, if like you call your landlord and you're like, hey, the hot water heater's like down. He's like, oh, okay. Like we're going to be out and fix it. It just kind of doesn't work like that there. So like, okay, we'll be around. And then like days and days went by. So it was like 7 days until it got fixed. And after that, like, I was like, I have to take a shower. It was hot down there too. So I was like, when I was going to the gym, getting super sweaty because it's like 90 degrees outside and I have to take a shower. So I just started taking cold showers. And then after it got fixed, I was like, I think I might do like a month of this as like a challenge. And then I did that. And then I pushed that from like 30 days to 50 days. And then I did 100 days. And then at 100 days, I made a goal of a year, 365 days of ice cold showers. Wow.
That's does not sound fun.
Yeah. What's been interesting is when you do kind of get used to it. And then we came back here and there's it's well water and it is like orders of magnitude colder.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's been my daily challenge. Mental.
That's cool though. It builds that resiliency.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I love talking about that, like in terms of metabolic flexibility, not just like the nutrition side of things, not just the, what the physiological side of things, but the mental side of being flexible, being resilient and building that up. Like, I think that's super, super important for just overall lifestyle and reaching your goals.
It's so much more what's interesting is things like nutrition or training are thought to be, largely physical, but it's between the ears. It's so much of it's between the ears. It's making the commitment to the goal, whether the goal has, a large enough, you can determine an emotional investment large enough from the goal. And so much of that has nothing to do with, the actual food you put in your mouth or the weights you lift. It's a decision you make and commit to in your own mind.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that's also really the importance of where having a coach comes in and having someone that can hold you accountable for that, because it's not just like, nutrition and training and all of that, but like there's so many different aspects of it. And it's like, if you don't have someone there, like on a daily basis, kind of pushing you, it's like, we think about the most elite athletes in the world, they know what they're supposed to do, but they all have their own coaches. Yeah. And it's like, I think if anybody ever has a goal that they're serious about, like get a coach, because not just they're going to be that outside eyes looking in, but also that accountability factor is just
the accountability is huge. For important. One, getting the objectivity from someone else, that's not emotionally invested, or like you said, or in yourself, to cloud your judgment. And two, it changes how you view it, because you don't want to, you're like, I reached out to this person, I signed up, I don't want to, not hold up my end of that arrangement. So you're going to submit that check-in. Whereas if it was like yourself, if you're coaching yourself or you don't have a coach, like you're not going to be as diligent with your progress photos, your weigh-ins, and you're like, oh, it's fine, I'll do it tomorrow. And then tomorrow becomes Friday. And then before you know it, you're not doing it anymore. But it's just that because you want to do well. It's like, you don't want to turn in a shitty check-in. You want to, fill everything out and do your due diligence. So that it just changes the commitment level and largely the amount of results you can get from it too, just by not your capabilities or anything, but just how you view the relationship.
Yeah, for sure. And just like a quick example of this, like sometimes when my clients are struggling to like pre-plan their days out, because I truly believe that if you're not like planning things, especially when it comes to like your food and things like that, and you don't have structure behind that, like it's just going to make your life so much harder. So with this particular client, we had issues with like planning ahead of time. And so I was like, all right, every night, just send me your screenshots of your tracking app for tomorrow. Like you've already pre-planned your entire day. I want you to do that like every single night for this week. And she was like, wow, like just having to do that, even if like I respond to all my client emails and all that stuff, but she was like, you don't even have to respond to it. Just knowing that I have to send you this every single night is already in itself keeping me accountable. Mm-hmm. And she's absolutely been crushing it. Like this was last week and she's doing it again this week, because like that is just that in itself, knowing you have to send something to someone and exactly what you said, like not wanting to either let them down or whatever it may be, just having that accountability factor is just huge. And then also, I think too, like the financial commitment, like
it changes
it completely changes it. And I think that's something that people have to realize too, like you have to invest in yourself. Like if you have a goal and you have been spinning your wheels trying to reach it and you haven't, like there's a reason you haven't reached it. And if you haven't had a coach, it's probably one of the reasons. But yeah, putting that financial commitment, and I mean, I do it, like I have my own coach and I pay him every month, and it's a commitment. And I know, I have that stake in the game. And I think that's super important.
Skin in the game is massive. A lot of it's just how you view investment, and a lot of things like with us as humans, or how society works, like we have strange attachments to money and we want to not waste our money. So when we do put it somewhere, where the amount of effort we put forth is just higher because of that attachment to money.
Yeah, for sure. I agree 100%. Awesome. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but do you have anything like coming up on your end in terms of anything you're doing business wise that you want to chat about?
Yeah. So I have my nutrition periodization group coaching program, and called the Metabolic Performance Protocol. And that is coming up next month. June 1st is when we kick off. So if you are looking for really to learn about nutrition periodization, more than just, I'm on a diet, I'm off a diet, we're talking maintenance calories, surplus, deficit, reverse, all of that, learning about the ins and outs of different types of feeding and dieting approaches, and all sorts of kind of nutritional science basics, and going deep dive on that. You should take a look into that. I also always have my one-on-one coaching, which is the metabolic performance protocol. Is there's a certain fit of person who's going to do best with that. And if you're outside of that, the one-on-one will be best for you based on just more open-ended timeframes, I should say, and being realistic. But that, otherwise, waiting for gyms to open up, making the best I can of my time in quarantine, still getting my 10K steps in every day, as much sunshine, sleep, making the best of it.
I feel you. So for your metabolic performance protocol,
there's a lot of syllables.
No, I love the name. Obviously metabolic flexibility, similar. So is that a program that you run like every quarter, or?
Yeah, typically around every quarter. So it runs about 4 times a year. It's 22 weeks long. So just about 5 months, depending on how the weeks line up. And I launch out a few times a year.
Awesome. Sweet. We'll definitely link those in the show notes. So do you want to tell our listeners like where they can find you on your website, social media, things like that?
Yeah. So you can find my website at strakernutritionco.com. On Facebook, same thing, Straker Nutrition Co. Or you can find me on Instagram at Aaron_Straker.
Okay. Sweet. I'll link all those in the show notes. So
perfect.
People can check you out.
All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think that was an awesome conversation. We dove into a bunch of different topics. So I know everybody's hopefully going to take some knowledge bombs away. And it was fun.
Hopefully. Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. I had a great time.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.
Bye. Okay, thanks for listening to that episode with Aaron Straker. I hope you enjoyed all the different topics that we chatted about and took away some relevant information that you could implement into your own life. I know my biggest takeaway from that episode was definitely the discussion on objective eating. I never really thought about it in the way that Aaron explained it, and it's definitely a concept that I'll personally be sharing and implementing with my clients and diving a little bit deeper into, because I think it's super interesting. So yeah, I hope you took away some relevant information, and if you want to share this episode, as always, as I mentioned in the intro, as I always mention, if you could share it on Instagram or take a screenshot, share it on Instagram, tag me at rachelgregory.cns. That will help spread the word. If you haven't left a review yet on iTunes, that would be awesome as well. Those really those reviews help spread the word as well. And yeah, I will see you next time.